Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another True Crime Tuesday. For the month of March, I will be uploading a true crime video every week. I am going to Spain for 3 or 4 weeks, I'm not sure yet. And actually, when I upload this, like when this is uploaded, I'll be in Spain. And I am up to my eyeballs in work. Like, I'm so busy right now. I didn't have time to pre-record like a bunch of videos. I really wanted to do like a role play and some trigger videos, but I didn't have time to prepare for them. And I had already researched a bunch of true crime cases, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna record all of them and upload them so that I have something to upload while I'm over there. Because I didn't want to like leave you guys high and dry. I've already missed a couple of Fridays the last couple of weeks because I've been so busy. So I know most of you will not mind. So yeah, let's get into it. Today's case is going to be about Jamie Fraley. Just move my notes a little bit closer. Okay. So Jamie was 22 years old when she went missing on April 8th of 2008. She lived in Gastonia, North Carolina. She was attending Gaston College and was planning to become a substance abuse counselor. So on April 7th, she became really sick with what she thought was the stomach flu. And she went to the hospital twice that day. She didn't have a driver's license, so she was relying on her friends and like the people in her building to drive her. That morning, she went to the hospital for the first time. She was sent home pretty quickly. One of her friends came by because Jamie was dog sitting for her. And, you know, in order to kind of repay her and to help her, she offered to take her prescription and drop it off. So later that day, Jamie was still feeling really bad, and she went back to the hospital. Now on this trip, she decided to ask her fiance's father to drive her. She was engaged to someone called Ricky Simmons Jr. They had been together since 2006, but in 2007, he went to jail for theft. Now, his father only lived 2 apartment blocks away from her. He was also the maintenance worker in her apartment building, so he was around a lot. And her fiance had kind of said to her father, you know, while I'm in jail, could you please look in on Jamie regularly and take care of her and help her? So, he of course said that he would help, and he drove her to the hospital. Now, there are some reports that say that he drove her back. There are some others that say that a friend drove her back, but either way, she got back to her apartment. And around midnight, she decided that it had to be something else than a stomach flu because she was feeling so bad, and she decided that she was going to go back to the hospital. Now, she called her mother and said, you know, I really need to go back to the hospital. I'm just not feeling well. And in the early morning of April 8th, she called one of her friends and told her what was going on. Told her, you know, I'm not feeling well. I'm getting worse and worse. I have to go to the hospital. I've already been twice today. And she said that she was just waiting on her ride. Now, she ended the call. At the end of the call, she said that her ride was here and she was going to go. Now, she didn't tell this friend who her ride was. She just said that it was a him. And that was the last time that anyone ever heard from Jamie. So on April 8th, she missed a very important meeting, and her family was really worried that they hadn't heard from her because they knew that she wasn't feeling well. They knew that, you know, she'd been to the hospital a few times, and they were just worried that something happened to her. So they went to her apartment, but Jamie wasn't there. Her purse, her ID, and all her personal belongings were still there, but her cell phone was missing. There were no signs of a struggle. The apartment door was locked, so they weren't really worried that something happened to her. They assumed that she was still at the hospital, you know, that maybe it wasn't a stomach flu, and they decided to do some further tests on her. They decided to keep her for observation overnight. So they just assumed that she was there, so they went to the hospital, but found out that she had never even checked in there the last time, which means that somewhere between her apartment and the hospital, she disappeared. Now, her family searched in a lot of different places but couldn't find her, so they reported her as a missing person. The Gaston County Police immediately conducted a large investigation. They put 3 full-time investigators on the case, and the state's Bureau of Investigation and the FBI all got involved. Now, 2 days after she was heard from, utility workers found her cell phone just a few miles from her apartment on the ground at an intersection. So, by the time that police got there and collected it, it had been touched by so many different people that they could no longer use any of the fingerprints or DNA on it. So they focused on what they found on the cell phone, like inside of it. And it showed that several calls had been made from the phone at 4:30 a.m. Now, they determined that none of these calls had anything to do with her disappearance. I don't know why they think this. I mean, it could be that some random stranger found the phone, picked it up, decided to make a bunch of calls before throwing it away again. Or it could be that I would say that whoever took her made the calls, but police said that it had nothing to do with her disappearance. I just don't know how they know who made those calls, but they said that it was separate from her case. A call was also made into her phone at 5 a.m., but to this day, police have not been able to confirm where the call came from. So they obviously didn't think her fiancé had anything to do with it since he was in jail, but they did immediately focus on his father. Because according to them, he was the last person to see her that day, which probably means that the reports that say he drove her back from the hospital that second time are true. Because if someone else had, then that person would have been the last one to see her, I guess. And so he had a very long criminal record. He spent 6 years in prison for manslaughter for killing a girlfriend. And he had several girlfriends take out a protective order against him. Apparently, he got very violent every time a girlfriend rejected him. Now, some people said that he had a very strange infatuation with Jamie. And he refused to take a polygraph test. I don't put much stock in polygraph tests. I remember I was listening to a podcast like months ago about something else, and they said, honestly, if I was asked to take a polygraph test, I'd probably say no, because there's nothing to be gained from it. You either pass and people go, yeah, but they're not very reliable, or you fail based on you could fail based on nerves, basically, or based on some info that you're trying to hide but not necessarily related to the case, or you refuse to take it to protect yourself. Most lawyers will advise you not to take one, and then you look suspicious because you're not taking one. So I don't really like polygraph tests, but it is mentioned that he refused to take one. Now, authorities strongly believe that he had something to do with it, so they were trying to build a very strong case against him with a lot of evidence. But unfortunately, on June 7th, so just under 2 months after she disappeared, an ex-girlfriend of his noticed a very strange smell in her car. And it was still there the next day, and it was getting really bad, so she decided to look everywhere in her car to see what might be causing it. And when she opened the trunk, she found the dead body of Ricky Simmons Sr. in there. So basically, police theorized that he stole the spare set of car keys from her purse a few weeks prior. She had reported that the spare set of keys of her car were stolen, and she had a protective order out against him, and that made him really mad. So they think that he locked himself in the trunk basically one day and decided to, because he had was going to try to do something to her by using the element of surprise, and basically that no one could see that he was doing it by hiding in her trunk, and he was going to pop out at her when she was driving her car. However, it must have taken her much longer to get back to her car than he had anticipated, and it was 90 degrees out that day, which is 30 degrees Celsius, so he most likely died from the heat in that trunk when she didn't. The person that could possibly let them know where she is gone. So shortly after this, her fiancé was released from prison. Now, obviously, this was a lot for him to deal with. His fiancé went missing without a trace, and then 2 months later, his father died. Now, he has said that he does believe his father most likely did something to Jamie, which is crazy. I mean, to me, that obviously means that he knew that his father was infatuated with Jamie. The fact that he asked her to take care of Jamie while he was in jail, I find that kind of strange if you know that he is infatuated with her. I mean, and especially if he has a history of violence towards women, wouldn't you be worried that he'd do something to her? Most of his family also said that they believe it's possible he had something to do with it. So, I'll get into the theories, but I can't really say theories. There's really only one, because they only have one real suspect, and that was Ricky Simmons Jr. Now, he had a record of getting obsessed with women and getting very upset when he was rejected, and he was infatuated with Jamie, who was very, very, very in love with his son. Jamie's mother has said that they were that kind of couple that just fell really hard for each other when they met each other. And, they got engaged pretty quickly. They got tattoos of each other. Like, they were just crazy about each other. So it could very well be that he was really jealous of his son. He was the kind of man that would get really into women and then get upset when he was rejected. And so the fact that he, in his older age, still hadn't found love, but his son was like really in love with a woman who was also in love with him, it could be that he just got really jealous of his son and wanted what he wanted. It could also be that since he was infatuated with Jamie, that maybe that day or a few days prior he tried to make a move on her and she rejected him, and that made him really mad. The cell phone being found at an intersection only a few miles away from where she lived, I wonder if she was trying to call for help and he tossed it out the window, or whether she threw it out the window as kind of like a trail. I don't know. She was obviously in trouble. I don't know why else the phone would be, found there. Now, a theory, I watched a YouTube video on this case, and a theory that this person presented that she hadn't found anywhere else, and I think is actually a very plausible theory, is that maybe he poisoned her. He was the maintenance worker for her building, which means, like most maintenance workers, would have a master key where they could enter every apartment whenever they wanted. So maybe he put something in her food in the days leading up to her being sick. I mean, she was really sick, and it was getting worse as the hours ticked by, not better. So, and also, she wanted to go back to the hospital to really, truly find out what happened to her or what was going on. And it's obvious that whoever took her there didn't want that, because they never brought her there. So maybe he poisoned her, and he was afraid that they were finally going to find out about it. And he, wanted to prevent her from getting there. Maybe he assumed that she would believe when the hospital said she had the stomach flu and that she would die in her own apartment from the poisoning. And because she really wanted to go back, he decided to prevent that. I think that it would have been her food. I don't think that he would have poisoned her with hiding anything in her house that's really damaging, because they searched her apartment and didn't find anything. And since they never recovered her body, I would imagine that he poisoned her with food, and they can't, investigate that. The of speaks a little bit in his favor, if I can say that much, is that it took an hour and a half for whoever took her to the hospital to get there, to get to her apartment. She was on the phone to her friend for an hour and a half before her ride arrived. He lived 2 apartment blocks away from her. He could have been out doing something, but what in the middle of the night was he doing that took him an hour and a half to get to her apartment? Was he, if he did poison her, was he maybe waiting for the poison to work more so that maybe he wouldn't have to take her anymore? Or was her ride someone else? I mean, I wouldn't know who. He's genuinely the only suspect, but I do find it a little strange that it took him that long to get there. Like an hour and a half. Like, even if he was doing something else, he'd have to be away. He'd have to be really far away to take an hour and a half to get back. So that I find a little bit strange. I also find the phone calls at 4:30 a bit strange. Yes, someone could have found her phone, but it was found at an intersection where there is really nothing around. There's a house or two around. There's a lot of forests around, but really nothing else. So for someone to find her phone there or find it somewhere else, make a few calls with it, and then throw it in that intersection is a little bit strange because it was the middle of the night. And like I said, it's not like it was a busy area with a lot of people walking around. No one, I can't imagine that anyone would be walking there. So I don't know. I find it a little bit strange. If she tossed the phone out the car, or he tossed the phone out the car, like when he was taking her to the hospital and like a struggle happened, then who made those calls at 4:30 at an abandoned intersection? This is what I don't get. I will say that in 2015, a man named Jerry Case made a confession that he killed Jamie, but police quickly dismissed this because he was actually in jail at the time that she disappeared. And he only knew details about the case that were made public, so there isn't really any way that he could have done it. That's all there is in this case. I feel really bad for them because, she was never found, and the only person who most likely knew what happened to her or where she was is dead, so it is very unlikely that they're ever going to find her. I still find it really kind of strange that the fiancé knew his father. I mean, he at the very least knew that his father had a history of violence towards women, and he was all like, I'll take care of my fiancé while I'm gone. I find that a little bit strange. But regardless, it was his father. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I know that this is not a 40-minute case like the Fort Worth Trio one. I was going to try to make them longer, but just not every case is that long.